What's up guys, it's Aaronitmar. Recently, Game Informer had the chance to sit down with Smash Ultimate director Masahiro Sakurai to discuss Smash Ultimate and of course the more recent reveals that we have seen from the final Smash Direct. So, in this video, we're going to talk about all of his answers and the questions and things that he may not have let us know about in the actual Direct. So, let's go ahead and jump in. First off, Game Informer asks why Sakurai decided to include so much content in this game, between all of the fighters and all of the stages, and just the fact that it has more content than any other Smash game to date. Sakurai says that in Smash for Wii U and 3DS, they were able to include quite a few fighters. And because he was working with the same team that worked on Smash for Wii U and 3DS, he thought if they worked a bit harder, they could make the dream of including all of the fighters from past games. He notices that there are people who are disappointed when fighters from previous games are cut in a future installment, and so in order to avoid this, he worked really hard to ensure everyone would return. And then of course he gets a little cheeky and says, but what I learned is that regardless of doing our utmost, no matter how hard we try, and no matter how many fighters we include, there will always be people who feel that way. So there are always people who are going to be disappointed that Waluigi or Isaac aren't in the game. And I don't know that he's really saying like you should be grateful, but he's just saying that you can't please everyone. Game Informer then asks if Smash Ultimate has a special significance because of the sheer amount of content that it has, but Sakurai says Smash is always special. Every time they make a new one, he always puts his all into it. So the series as a whole is special, but each individual title doesn't really hold a special place above others. Sakurai is then asked about the process of adding new characters to the game. He says that when they decide on new fighters, they take things into consideration such as labor and man hours, as in how long will it take to develop this fighter from scratch. And they decide on these fighters very early in the planning stage. It's pretty much the first thing that they do. And they never add or remove any characters as they continue to work. So if they start out with a set number of characters, that is what they're going to work on. They're not going to add a fighter, they're not going to remove any fighters, they're going to do their utmost to ensure that what they decided during the project plan comes to fruition. He also says that as far as the actual fighters go, he uses the Smash ballot a little bit and then also balances it out with characters that people might not expect in order to have kind of a difference in fighters. And of course he brings up Incineroar in this because when the Smash ballot was out, Pokemon Sun and Moon were not a thing, so Incineroar cannot have been voted for. But they knew that a new Pokemon game was coming, so they kept one spot open for a Pokemon from the brand new series, and then they decided on which Pokemon that would be later on. It's kind of like how they worked with Greninja. All they knew for Greninja is basically like its concept art, or maybe it's like finalized art, but they didn't actually know how it functioned in the game. This time they at least waited until the game was done so that they could see how the Pokemon works and then develop it based on what it actually does in its games. I also get the feeling they didn't specifically pick Incineroar this time, they just left it as like an empty spot, and then later they would go through the Pokedex and be like, alright, which Pokemon is the coolest, which starter, which legendary, so that we can have a cool Pokemon rather than choosing it straight from the get-go. The next question Game Informer asks is if Sakurai has learned any methods or tricks from creating earlier Super Smash Bros. Games, and asks if those have aided in the development of Smash Ultimate. He says that everything is connected, so everything that he's learned from the development of past Smash games definitely helps with development for each new one. But he also points out that this time he actually developed the game with the same company, so they didn't need to start from scratch like they have in the past. Smash 64 was almost an indie game if you can kind of put it in that mindset. It had Nintendo licensing and Nintendo backed it, but it was a very small project at the time. So it just didn't have the development power that later Smash games did. Melee, of course, was with HAL Laboratories, but again, it was a big Nintendo-backed project at that time, so it had a much bigger development team. Brawl was developed using a freelance team, and Wii U and 3DS were with Bandai Namco. So for all of those, they had to build everything from scratch each and every time, the development environment and the actual staff. But this time, the previous development team has come back, so they're able to reuse things that they used in Smash for Wii U and 3DS in Smash Ultimate. Game Informer then asks how Sakurai and his team ensure such great attention to detail for so many characters and stages in one game. And then Sakurai says that reproducing what was in the original work doesn't always come out like it should in Smash. He says that there needs to be a kind of balance between realistic and comical and exaggeration in order to make something look real but also not awkward. And then of course he says that being knowledgeable about each character is a must, and so their staff sometimes has to go deep into the original works of each character in order to find and create even better elements than they previously had. Next, Game Informer turns to the character reveal trailers and asks if Sakurai himself is involved in the storyboarding of these trailers, just like he was during Smash for Wii U and 3DS. Sakurai says he creates all of the plot for each and every trailer, including that of World of Light. He's very deeply involved. He makes very complete adjustment requests to the CG staff that creates the trailers, and he reviews things like the audio as well. And then he makes sure that the gameplay after the cinematic summarizes the character in a very good way. He says that as far as the actual game development cycle goes, he should probably entrust this to someone else so he can focus more on the game, but he hasn't really found anybody he trusts to do that yet. Next, Game Informer asks Sakurai if he has enjoyed the fan reception to each time a new piece of information is revealed for Smash Ultimate. He says that he did plan to create something satisfying for the fans, but he really underestimated how the actual reaction was going to be. It was just far more than he expected. I think that's something he actually said right after the game was revealed at E3 or at Nintendo's E3 Direct, but he just was overwhelmed by the reaction. Game Informer then asks him about fan speculation and how people anticipate certain characters to be in the game. And then they say how with Piranha Plant, they gave players one of the most unpredictable inclusions. So they follow up by saying, how does it feel to still be able to surprise fans so many years later? And then they ask if that was the intent of adding Piranha Plant. And Sakurai says something I actually didn't expect to be the answer. He says that he doesn't really pay attention to the surprise element when they develop a fighter, because that element, the element of surprise, fades so quickly after the announcement has been made. So yeah, it's important to have a big surprise for the fans, but overall, that's not going to impact the actual fighter in the game for years to come. The actual playability and the development of the fighter is what's going to impact that character's legacy. He also says that it's important to have a good balance in the game. Characters like Mr. Game & Watch, Rob, and Duck Hunt Dog were all examples of fighters that were included outside of a player's expectation. He says that if all of the fighters just end up being the hero or heroine, then there's not really much of a difference. They all don't really stand out from each other, and it's probably not very interesting. Unlike some main characters from not widely known franchises, Piranha Plant is a character that everyone can know well if they've played a Mario game. And I feel like that's actually kind of, not really a jab, but just kind of a reference again to characters like Isaac or Geno. Golden Sun and Super Mario RPG are just minuscule when you compare it to the overarching game series that are representative in Smash. Zelda, Mario, Pokemon. So many people have played these games in a general sense that specific characters from either, Super Mario RPG is still part of Mario, but Geno really is only in that one game. And Golden Sun just doesn't really have the same kind of impact and reach that other characters have. So I think that's probably why Piranha Plant was chosen. I mean, he says it's a character that everyone knows well, but I think that's probably why we don't necessarily see Isaac or Geno, at least right now, because they're just not on the same level as other characters. The conversation then moves on to spirits, and Game Informer asks what was the idea behind it and why did they decide to implement it in the way that they did. Sakurai says that they wanted to provide a good single-player experience, but they just didn't have enough time or development resources to specifically create character models for that specific mode. And if we think back to Subspace Emissary, there is a ton of original content in there that doesn't really exist anywhere else in the game. All the different bosses and enemies, they're really kind of just contained in Subspace mode, with the exception of maybe Boss Rush mode. So because they didn't have the development time for this, they needed to come up with a system that was fun and not repetitive when you battle against computer players, but also didn't take a ton of development time because they couldn't, make character models and specific fights and things like that. And then he lists cons for this type of a system. The first con is that there are so many fighters that they can't tell an individual story, and so that's why I think subspace mode kind of wouldn't work in a game this big. With Brawl, there were about half of the characters that we have now, if not even less, so it was easier to make a story, but with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, there are 70 characters, so it's almost impossible to make a decent story including everybody. The second is that they can't create exclusive stages for the game mode, so that's why Spirits mode and World of Light takes place on normal stages in the game. And third, they said that they can't add new rules or things like that. On the other hand, he says that one of the pros is that they can utilize a variety of characters because they aren't specifically designing trophies around them, it's just their like basic art. So it's kind of a downgrade in one sense, but they can exponentially increase the amount of characters and representation as a result of that. And then of course they also have a large pool of music, stages, and fighters because of just the sheer content that Smash Ultimate has. And so they concluded that they can create something themed after this kind of idea using a large library of characters outside of just fighters, and they let players enjoy simulating fights using those fighters. And so that's basically where the concept of Spirits came from, and it just kind of expanded from there. Game Informer then asks Sakurai how his time creating Smash for 2 decades now has been. They're curious how he looks back at his time with the series up to this point, and if he has any highlights or favorite memories. And he says that Smash is actually a miracle every time they're able to create a new one, because it's kind of different from any other game series that comes out regularly. They have to get approval from all of the IP holders, and if they can't, then they just can't make the game the way they want. So he says that every time they make a Smash game, they are walking a fine line. Although personally, I think this is kind of naive of him, because I feel like every game developer would want their character in Smash. Back when Sakurai left HAL Laboratories, the industry practice was for a game sequel to continue to be developed by the company that created the previous one. So if Nintendo had followed this, HAL Laboratories would have created Smash Bros. Brawl. But Satoru Iwata hunted down Sakurai and wanted him to make the next Smash installment because he really valued what Sakurai brought to the table and did for the development of each Smash game. So it was actually kind of unusual that he was able to do that. And without that decision, Smash Ultimate probably would not be in the position or the state that it's in, because Sakurai probably wouldn't have been involved. And then Game Informer asks probably the big question, and that is that Smash Ultimate can have 2 meanings, ultimate meaning the best, or ultimate meaning final. So he asks if this game is the end of a chapter for Sakurai. And Sakurai states that every time he makes a Smash game, he makes it under the assumption that this is going to be the last Smash game, which is kind of an altered response than he's used to give. It used to be this game will be the last Smash game, but now it's kind of like I'm developing it as if this is the last Smash game. If there's another one in the future, I will develop it the same way, but for now, I will just assume this is the last one. And then of course he says he doesn't know what the future holds, so he doesn't know if there's not going to be a next one or if this is the last one. Although, personally, kinda dumb, Smash is so big, absolutely no way this will be the last Smash game. And Game Informer's final question, they pose that if somebody told Sakurai in 1998 that his little creation for the Nintendo 64 would one day grow into something as big as Smash Ultimate 20 years later, what would have gone through his mind? And Sakurai says on one hand he probably would have said, "Oh, you must be kidding, that's insane." But on the other hand, he's also thinking, well, that's not entirely impossible, because Sakurai was just seeing how quickly games were evolving, and he was just super optimistic about the future of gaming as a whole. And that is everything that Game Informer asked him, and pretty much all of Sakurai's answers. I don't really think I skipped over any details. But if you guys are interested in reading the article for yourself, of course it will be in the description down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. If you are new, be sure to subscribe because I cover Smash Ultimate every single week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out, and I hope you have an awesome day.